In this episode, I have a conversation with my son, William, who is turning 23 in September and will be graduating from Colorado State with a degree in computer science. He's hoping to get a job working for an organization that is passionate about the environment. William is a super interesting Gen Z young man, not just because he's my son, but because of his journey, his temptation to turn to the dark side, as I call it, his hunger for knowledge, and his growing capacity to reflect about his relationship with himself and how he fits into the collective of humanity. His strong opinions remind me of me in my 20s, which makes me cringe. But honestly, he's way ahead of where I was back then when it comes to being aware of larger collective forces that are wreaking havoc right now. The dismantling that's happening, that's trying to drive something new out of the collective unconscious before it's too late. William is part of a generation that has absorbed the impact of collective dysfunction and is resisting participating in systems that are peaking in their exploitation. Many in this generation also carry the burden of collective anxiety because what must be created to replace the systems that seem to be dismantling doesn't exist. And at the same time, they must weather the scolding and disdain by their older generations. Fuck them, I say. I've written about this, and I'll include a link in the description box to a blog post and podcast episode titled, What is Generation Z Mirroring Back to Us? I love Generation Z, especially Gen Z men, which makes sense because my generation, Generation X, was a lighter version of the same rebellion against exploitive systems that are now so desperate to survive, they're pulling us back into the dark ages. Anyway, William and I have deep and feisty conversations at least once per week. Sometimes they're so heated, one of us has to say, I love you, but I can't continue this conversation. Love you, bye. Then we do a little texting back and forth and sign off with one final, I love you. We found a groove to managing our intensity, and over time, what happens beautifully captures C.G. Jung's concept of the transcendent third. I used to say to my children when they were younger that the only way we get through our family difficulties is by talking and then talking some more. My conversations with William are like that for both of us. Our capacity to hold the tension between our views, which have common core values, eventually leads to new insights and more nuanced understanding for both of us of the topics we discuss. Just the other day, I finally understood what William meant when he said, there's no meaning in life. Yikes, that always made me cringe. But when I understood that, what he really meant was that we decide for ourselves what our lives mean, then suddenly we're on the same page. It's so beautiful. It makes me want to cry. I'm a mother after all. All I wanted was to be a good enough mom, and now I have two young adult children who are kind human beings and both advocates for marginalized groups, including the planet. So let's get started. Hey, William.
Hi, Mom.
Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you.
So, hey, what's up today? What's
Not
funny?
much.
What's funny today? What's interesting today?
Uh, I don't know actually. I haven't been doing much today. I just got up, so I don't have any news for you yet.
Okay, I know later on you'll send me a text with something interesting,
Most likely.
right? Yep, sounds good. Okay.
I'm boring. I don't do anything. I'm not just like I literally don't have anything going on. So I took a bike ride. That's crazy.
Oh, tell me about your biking lately. I
You can
love I love the videos you send me about it
yeah.
and the
Well,
pictures.
I had my bike sitting in my trunk for a year. Never took it out of my car. You know me. I folded my back seats down, put my bike in there when I picked it up from Grandpa John's.
Hmm.
Like, I think that was more than a year ago.
And then what made you get it out and get it? What didn't you have to get a new tire or something? Or
Yeah. Well, I keep. I like. I had this weird thought where I'm like, cars to me like kind of stress me out. I have like mechanical sympathy. I don't know if you know what that means.
mm-mm.
But like it's like you feel bad for machines, like not like
Hmm.
literally, but
Hmm.
it's like it makes you cringe when you like a car running without oil, like it's like gears grinding on each other, like shifting, like it's kind of it's like a bad feeling. It's called mechanical sympathy. What I forgot, what did I start with?
No, what
I'm co-
prompted you? What
no,
prompted
I'm
you to?
coming back around to my
Okay, to the
point.
bike.
Oh, the bike, yeah.
Yeah.
And so my car, I'm like, there's this extra like 10, 15 pounds that I'm just carrying around. And if you do the math, like thousands of miles carrying like 15 extra pounds is like probably extra gallons of gas. And I'm like, why is this just sitting in my car? And so I finally took it out and then I'm like, well, I might as well ride it. And then I put it back together, got a new tire, all that. And Fort Collins is also like the best town in the country to bike in, I'm pretty sure.
Is that right?
So I think so. I remember hearing that when I first moved here, and it makes sense biking around because you can go. I went like 20 miles, and you never cross a street. It's all tunnels under streets or through like the city parks, so there's no roads anyway. But it's great. But I like biking. I
That's
always had a lot of
fascinating.
fun. Like in middle school, biking around with all your friends is such a good time.
Hmm.
Like that was our go-to was like bikes, and then when we all got cars that kind of went away, and it like you don't really think about it again, but like riding around on my bike is a lot of fun. Kind of brings your inner kid out.
And you
But
also love snowboarding.
yeah, of course, but
Yeah.
it's 95 degrees right now, so that's a little hard to do, right?
Wrong season for snowboarding. So all right, this is a great start. I love it. So for my listeners, William and I have lots of chats. They're always spontaneous, and so we thought we'd try having a spontaneous chat with a little bit of structure. And I reflected about sort of the main topics that always come up for us, and also some, just reflections about how our conversations have changed and evolved over the years, actually. So I think this is one thing that kind of sums you up perfectly. So remember in our house in Mequon, that show called Planet Earth?
Yeah,
And do you remember how addicted we all were as a family to that show? Like, it
was
was just something that really resonated with all of us as a family. And um and then I also remember, I think you were like in third grade and you came home and you were a little proud of yourself and frustrated because there was something that your teacher said that was not correct based on your own research on the side. And you said, "Mom, I corrected my teacher today." And I said, "Ooh, how did that go?" And she didn't really appreciate it. She could have really patted you on the back for having the initiative and being impressed by your love of knowledge. But then you said this other thing. You said, "Mom, I think I learn more watching National Geographic than I do for my teachers." So I feel like that kind of sums up maybe like what's different about you and your generation and access to knowledge. And so I thought you could just talk a little bit about education, either your experience, your observations, and now you're about to finish college, and just go anywhere you want with that, whatever comes up for you.
yeah, I love Planet Earth. That's the one I just had to Google. It was David Attenborough was the British, the BBC guy with the most amazing presenting voice ever. I think he's still around
Mm,
actually. He's like 100 years old, but he's been doing those since like the 60s or whenever,
yeah.
a long time. But
Yes.
yeah, I think that's a great point because one thing I can never get out of my mind is that school, in terms of the academic structure and how the way they believe kids learn best is hasn't changed in like 2000 years longer. If you go back to like I mean if it's devolved actually, if you go back to like the antiquity, like classical Greek period, you had pupils with tutors. You had one very knowledgeable person in many subjects who would tutor a small group of students. And I'm just speaking in generalities.
Hmm.
I'm sure that was the wealthy people for like the very most part. But anyways, even like just the idea of having a tutor and pupils has devolved into now having it's just gotten bigger and bigger. Ideally, I mean a lot or
Like
not
mass
ideally.
production, like a
Yeah,
manufacturing style.
yeah, and like the basic idea is still there, a teacher and students, but I feel like it's devolved nowadays when and not just devolved, like the idea of testing has stayed the same and all that, but in the last 10, 15 years, the internet has become a thing. And not even just like, I mean, even before, like National Geographic and Planet Earth, that stuff was much more accessible than it was 20 years ago, just because you could record it and watch it on demand or whatever. But nowadays, you can watch any of that anytime, get any information whenever you want, but they still treat school the same as if it was the 1800s. I mean, you go
Hmm.
back to the schoolhouses in uh, like 1850s America, and they have a teacher writing stuff on the chalkboard, and they have the students watching and copying it down, and then they give them a quiz, and that's exactly how they do it today. When the way we learn is completely unrelated to how it was back then. I got most of my knowledge from outside of school, and I was taught how to use it in school, and I just I think it's a important point because it really we have such access to all this knowledge, but we're told not to do it, and it's actually bad to do it.
Hmm.
And I do think that is something that affected me a lot
Yeah.
because I it made me hate school because they instead of letting me be curious, they told me no, don't be curious. That's bad to be curious. You should only be curious about what we tell you to be curious about. Um, and that that made me hate school. I was never a bad student, but it kept me from ever becoming a having a 4.0 because I didn't want to learn about what they wanted to teach me about, and then they didn't give me any options to learn about anything else. And it's like, yeah, I get you get the math, you get the basic stuff, but
Yeah. And one of the things that I just always impresses me about you is that you're just always learning. You're learning stuff that you're not learning in college. Like you are just always seeking out knowledge. Why don't you share like what are the some of the topics that you're always like it either comes across you in your YouTube feed or are you searching out specific things? Because I know you're really interested in geography and like changing migration patterns and languages and like do you like how do you think to go get knowledge on those particular topics? How does that happen?
it's really just curiosity. It's just I'm really interested in history and like human history to be specific, like uh from like the classical period, like Bronze Age collapse through like the classical period to modern day. So like the last 3-4 thousand years. I'm very interested in that, and I'm a computer scientist. So I don't
Mhm.
really fault the school system for not teaching me something that's completely unrelated to my degree. I just happen to be interested in it tangentially, and I was able to take a pre-modern Western civilization class which I really enjoyed, but I don't think it really is anything about school. I think I'm
Mm.
just really curious about that topic, and I mean, to be honest, it's not really useful outside of postulating and sitting on a bar stool and thinking. You can't really do anything with history. It's not to say that it isn't really important, but I think that's kind of an anomaly there. It's hard to like relate back to my experience as a kid because I didn't really care about that stuff when I was younger. Whereas I
Right.
feel like when you have a brain that's older, you tend to be curious. For me, personally, I got more curious about like mundane things.
Hmm.
Like when I was 12, I never would have given a shit about anything in the middle period or the
Hmm.
Middle Ages, but now it's fascinating to me.
Hmm.
Um, sorry,
So
I'm
no, 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 that's
losing
perfect.
my
Though
train. What was the
so
question again?
no, 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 you answered it. But the one thing I'm thinking about that um sort of did intersect in your earlier education and your curiosity is right now I have this image. You remember being on vacation, you were like 4 years old and there was a little tree frog. Like there's that picture of you, the tree frog is on your chest.
I know
Eh,
the picture.
yeah,
Yeah.
you probably don't remember that, but you always had a really, really interesting relationship with nature and bugs and animals, and you could walk, butterflies would land on you and that sort of thing. And then I remember after you graduated from high school, you're like, you know what? My number one favorite topic was environmental science. So it made sense.
It
And
still
then
is,
yeah,
honestly.
but I feel like there were a couple of years where you weren't really that in tune with nature, but then it kind of returned. And, you know, intuitively, you ended up out at Colorado State, which is a place that sort of really values relationship with place. And, you know, and yes, you're in computer science, but you also are interested in work in applying that to the topic of, you know, saving the planet and environment. So it's kind of like a meandering way for a couple of things that connected, something that you were passionate about and you had a natural interest in, and then connected to, maybe it was like 2 classes in high school that you really, really were excited about.
It
And
was
then
one.
right, yeah, it was one class and you're like, "That's my favorite class of my entire
Yeah,
education."
I still remember the teacher.
Yeah.
It was the environmental science class. I think it was Mr. Franzmeyer was his
Mm,
name. Just this I mean, he looked exactly how you'd imagine him. Bigger guy, bushy beard, long flowing gray hair. He'd wear like a plaid button-up shirt and like
a tree
cargo
hugger.
pants. Yeah, and he'd every Wednesday he'd wear a different wolf shirt and he'd call it Wolf Shirt Wednesday.
Oh,
And
I love it.
everyone in this high school loved him. I mean, he was the guy. Like he would he was the kind of teacher where he it's really hard to explain. I mean, honestly, it isn't. He was a great teacher. He's a good person. That's really all it takes to teach kids is a good person. It doesn't really matter how knowledgeable in the subject you are if you can relay someone else's knowledge in a way that students are able to.
Mhm,
I mean, obviously, a student shouldn't or a teacher should know what they're talking about, but we need so many teachers that it's crazy to expect them all to be experts, and it's just enough for them to be able to relay the information of other experts. And
mhm,
I feel he was an expert himself, but he was also really good at just going. He wasn't afraid to just go, here's a documentary, enjoy. And
mm.
I mean, what's wrong with a lot of teachers out of principle just wouldn't do that because they felt as though the students were winning, you know, because they got to watch
Oh.
a movie. And my environmental science professor or the professor, he was a high school teacher. He understood that if I throw on a David Attenborough documentary about coral bleaching and ocean acidification, this man's beautiful voice is gonna make them pay attention more than mine is. And so
Mm,
he wasn't afraid of doing that. He's like he'd go sit in the corner and then just go through his emails while we watch uh well we learn and watch a
mhm,
documentary. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I think that's how teachers should be teaching, right? He was malleable to what the students were like. And that was I don't know if you remember a lot of the students on my snowboard team were like I mean, they were all like weed smoking, like hooligans, like
mhm,
messing
yeah.
around in class, like doing stupid shit, vaping in the bathroom. And he would, obviously, vaping is illegal, and he was not, you know, he probably knew what was going on, in the bathroom every teacher day. It was a really weird time. That was like when it all started, so that's kind of a weird thing. But he would let like yeah, I remember there's a couple kids who go to the bathroom like 4 times. Instead of getting mad and like punishing them, he would just let it happen, and no one failed his class. And I'm like,
Mm,
other teachers would be like, so instead of them becoming vindictive and spiteful, they began to respect him and stop doing that because they were
mm.
embarrassed of it, because they
Ooh.
respected him as a person. And so I personally, I remember I would like just leave the class just to go fuck around and you know, just because I didn't want to be there. And eventually I would stop doing that because I felt bad.
Ooh,
Like
it's
it made
almost
me feel bad the way to think he thought that I was slacking and I didn't want him to think that. And that's the only teacher that ever made me feel like that.
right. So the respect he showed you sort of allowed you the opportunity to correct your own behavior
Yeah,
instead of him like micromanaging you and
yeah.
and scolding you, you actually got to choose.
It's like when your enemy's making a mistake, don't
Yeah.
interrupt him. We were
It,
his enemy
oh,
and he let us make a mistake and we
eh,
ended up becoming his ally.
oh, geez, William, that's brilliant.
I don't know about
Okay,
that.
one of those brilliant moments. But okay, so let's move on. Another topic we talk a lot about is I hate to lump this all in one, so you just go wherever you want with it. But you know, the let's just say marginalized groups in general, but you know, women, the relationships between women men and gender and LGBTQ and all of that. And one thing in particular I'm thinking about is you have been really great about self-reflecting about how your own views have changed. And for you to only be, turning 23 and yet to be aware of how your own views sort of changed. There was a time, and where I'm going with this is that there are a lot of Gen Z men who I would say are kind of at risk to be exploited by dark forces. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and not
And
even just men, like children.
absolutely. So I wonder if you could touch on, I talk about it as there was a time that, and you even said I almost kind of went to that dark side where I embraced being a victim and kind of like, started, believing stereotypes and having a little bit of like intolerance. And then something made you turn that corner and become the biggest fighter for marginalized groups, which meant that you had to come into better relationship with yourself to not see yourself as a victim anymore. So I wonder,
Well, yeah.
what you think about all that and young men in particular.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially the whole victim thing, this idea of that anyone else is making anyone feel it. Like my ill will I didn't have any malice or ill will towards
Mm-mm,
anyone ever. I've
you
never been
didn't.
a mean person. I've never wanted to hurt anyone or see anyone get hurt. But
Hmm.
that doesn't mean I didn't used to be an asshole. Just a
Hmm.
piece of shit who was just like looking for reactions. And every class clown young man has that moment where they want attention and they do things to get it. And that's another story. But I want to focus on when I was in high school, or not even middle school, really, and early in high school, people were saying slurs like the F word for gay people. They were saying the R word for neurodivergent people. You name it. People were horrible, and it was coming from this. For me, looking back on it, it was always coming from a place of insecurity. If I ever made fun of someone for, and here's the thing, we never made fun of anyone for actually being gay. It was, like we think like this part, you just call someone gay, and it's like you're making fun of this kid. It was like when we were 12, someone would just be called gay for no fucking reason, and people would be. Oh, I'm sorry for swearing so
It's
much,
okay.
but
You could do it.
I was like it was so clearly just coming from a personal place of projection for
Hmm.
me. Personally, I remember I would only ever like my thought process. I remember I can see it in my head. If I call him gay, they won't think I'm gay. Because if
Mm.
I call him gay, that means I hate gay people. And why would I hate myself? And this is what as a 12-year-old I thought. And I remember clearly thinking like, "Oh, I'm feminine. I have longer hair. People mistake me as a girl. I need to overtly act as though I'm not feminine
Mm.
or not gay." And so I'd go out of my way to make fun of
Mm.
other people and be an asshole just to put other people down to bring myself up. And that is whether or not people want to admit it, that is how bigots feel.
Yeah.
People aren't bigots because they genuinely care about the the immutable characteristics of another person. They
Right.
care about their own characteristics that they can't change, and they're projecting it onto other people. And that's how I felt. And imagine I was able to reflect on that and change. Imagine the amount of people who still have that child brain thinking that exact same way walking around today who feel like that. And that is so clearly
And
what's
who are
going
fit and
on.
who are 50-year-old men.
That is so clearly what's
Right.
going on because
Yeah.
if you try to do any sort of logic discussion with them, you realize they have no logic, they have no motivation, they have no purpose. There's no reason they're doing anything. They won't talk about it. And so you have to begin to realize that it's coming from inside them. It's
Mhm.
not this exterior bigots, transphobes, homophobes, racist people. They all want to make it seem as though there's this outside something changing, something that is making them have to act.
Mhm.
When in reality, nothing is changing, or everything is always changing, of course. But in that context, it is them that is uncomfortable with everyone else, and they're trying to like vent about it.
Right.
And that's why people like you and I, who are, I like to think I'm confident in myself. I'm not too concerned on. I don't really care which way people perceive me, male or female. It doesn't matter to me.
Hmm.
And once I came to that realization of people who know me, who I like to be around, and who like to be around me, will always respect me and will always see me as who I see myself and who they want to see me as. And so it doesn't matter what everyone else sees. And I think people like you and I understand that, and that we have people like each other, family, to validate each other, and
Hmm.
that's really what you need. And so we don't have to unleash on other people. And
Yeah.
I like, I'm embarrassed of my past self. Like I would beat my, like, even if it would send me to jail, I would beat the shit out of that little kid. I'm sorry. Like I hate who I used to be. It was
No.
not good. But I'm very happy that I was able to become who a person who I like to look in the mirror at. Like when I
What do
was
you
in high school, I didn't like looking in the mirror. When I look in the mirror now, I'm like, I don't notice flaws. I'm like, "Oh, I like how I look today." And I think it's this, once you, it's more than just what it's a whole bigger thing of just
so do you
self-confidence, I
so
feel
then
like.
do you know then as you look back, was it sort of subtle and over time that you
Oh yeah.
changed, or was there something specific? Because I'm wondering, like, what kind of advice can we give, I don't know, anybody out there, either a man your age or a mom of a man your age or other podcasts, or like like how is there anything we can do,
I
because those insecurities are so easily exploitive by
Yeah,
people
and
who are just, want to make
yeah,
money off of hate.
and
So,
this might sound weird and contradictory, but I really think to get to that point, you have to see yourself as a disappointment. You have to be
okay.
disappointed in yourself in order to move on.
Mm,
What what is a problem is these people are so, and by these people I mean people who are very unwilling to self-reflect, people who are
yeah.
always a hair trigger away from taking it out on everyone but themselves, right?
Hmm.
And so a huge problem with people like that, especially ones that I've met, is they are completely unwilling to admit that they have done anything wrong.
Right.
And the way I was able to realize my behaviors were just not good for a functioning human being, not healthy, I had to see myself as like this kind of just like pile of shit who's just
Okay.
like just this
Mm,
meaningless waste who is doing nothing for himself or anyone else. And I just remember just it, and it wasn't a moment. It'd be
okay.
ridiculous for me to look back and pretend like I had this like like this lucid sentience as a child. I didn't. It took years. But looking back on it now, it's a lot easier to like turn 5 years into one thought.
Hmm.
And it just there's this moment of you'll realize after, I think I began to gradually change unconsciously at
Hmm.
first, which is, I'm trying to come up with like a strategy advice on how to trigger this, but it's hard because for me looking back, I can't like say this is what you do, because
Right.
for me it happened. I didn't do it on purpose.
Right.
It initiated itself.
Would
Um,
you say one day you just kind of got sick of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's the thing. I began to slowly change from like seventh to eighth grade or whatever. I began to mature and stop saying like stupid jokes and stuff. And I began to really hate the way other people saw me.
Mm,
And I think that I was not mature enough or confident enough to to see myself as a disappointment
mm,
at the time.
right.
But seeing this caricature that everyone else knew as me kind of allowed me to see myself outside of myself.
Mm,
And not everyone gets that. I
mm-mm.
was kind of the class clown, so everyone knew me and they knew my sister, they knew Rachel. and they knew that she was like really popular, good at sports, and I was the complete opposite. And I think being able to like see that gave me an advantage because I was able to go, oh, I don't like that without acknowledging that's me. Because at first I was kind of like, oh, that's just what they think. But over time, when I got to high school and the teachers stopped
You really
suspend
changed.
when they
Yeah.
stopped suspending me for swearing
Right.
and like, getting up in class and walking around, when they started treating me like an adult and I
Mm.
realized that I was acting out of anger and like
Hmm.
backlash before because of the way
Right.
they were punishing me. And I realized that no, that's not the way they just saw me. That's how I was.
Hmm.
And that allowed me to then take that moment and go, wow, I don't
But
like who I am.
and
Instead of
you
going, I don't like how I was able to acknowledge that's who I am. And then I
and
moved
also
on from
but
there.
also I think something key that you were able to do is you were able to observe. You were able to detach from this caricature. You're able to like personify it because when you're drowning in it, you can't tell the difference. You can't discern the way that you were able to discern. So there's something about you that you were able to oh, this is the way they see me. Oh, I'm that's not me. They're not being fair to then like, oh, what do I look like from afar? And then you were able to see you from
It
afar. And
was
then,
kind of the 5 stages of grief, right?
oh, yeah,
Like
I like it.
denial and what is it? Denial, anger, rejection,
Ex-
acceptance. I'm
acceptance
forgetting
and
all of them, but
sadness. Yeah.
yeah, sadness. It was this no, whatever, and then oh, I'm mad at that they think I'm like that, and then it was kind of this ah. Yeah, kind of like this
Maybe I
moment of
am. Right, right.
reckoning of like humility, where like
I love it.
maybe I
I love
was
it.
like that, and then it made me sad that I felt that I was
Mm.
like that, and that people
Oh.
thought. And obviously, I'm making it sound like this was an intentional thing. It was really unconscious. It was me making conscious decisions based off of unconscious feelings.
And also, we should add that you did have some difficult situations with being targeted and being overly suspended and referred
Yeah,
and it
by
and
the
it
school, not
yes, yes.
students.
So
I
so
feel like I really wasn't bullied. If anything, it was by the school.
absolutely. Yeah. So okay, so let's move on to another topic that you're really passionate about, which
Actually, I
mhm, go
just want
ahead.
to say
Yeah.
I have to say, I was never bullied. I was like a
Mm,
rat, like a bad. I was not like a good kid, like when I was younger. I should have been bullied, but I never was. And I just have to say, I appreciate that about my generation is that,
mhm.
I mean, it's just, there's something different about our generation where whenever I see a scene of like bullying where they're like throwing food at kids or like physically hurting kids, I'm like, I never like I don't mean to say to put this experience. I went to like an uppity upper class, like
Yeah.
mostly white, very like pretentious school. So not I'm sure it's an anachronism, but I just want to say like I'm proud of my generation for like we don't really do bullying per se. I mean, we do,
Yeah.
but I mean, looking back, I was ripe to be like that kid, and even the like special needs kids, I think there was a trans person in our grade, and even they really like it was like like murmuring. It was never like bullying. It was
A-
like
And
just murmuring.
I think also I viewed that among the students, even though there was that, that kids are jerks to each other, there did seem
No
to be
doubt, yeah.
like, there did seem to be more acceptance of just people that are different,
Yeah.
like neurodivergent. And you're right. It was really more coming from the teachers. And if you did not fit into that sort of framework, that mold and, that kind of school district, then and it was more about like disrupting,
Yeah.
just being a disruptor. They did not
It
like,
was how dare you like
yeah,
disrupt the
go
system
to the office,
we have
go
so
to the
carefully
office.
cultivated. Yeah.
Right.
But
So,
I mean, not to say that students were like people made me cry all the time. They said really mean shit. But
yeah.
I never even the people who I was like personal enemies with, if we even did get into like uh confrontations. I
scuffle.
remember there was this one kid, I'm not gonna say any names, but he like stole shit out of my locker and I like threw a lock at his head and like made him bleed. And I remember we ended up being friends. Like
Oh,
we found solace in kicking balls onto the roof together, pissing the teachers off. And
yeah,
I'm like, that's what I take away from that is
yeah,
not the bullying, it's the lack of it. And I
yeah.
think that if there was I don't have any lasting trauma from I can't remember anything mean anyone ever told me from
Hmm.
being younger, and I just think that's important to. I
Yeah.
don't know why I brought that
I
up.
like that.
I'm just kind of like happy about it. It's just
I
something that I appreciate.
I think there's something different about your generation in that way. So, okay, so let's get to another topic that one that gets you fired up. And generally, I would say it has to do with economic systems. So, capitalism and hoarding and billionaires, and you have some pretty stringent opinions on that. And I have two little memories that I want to share. During the fall of 2020, I went into 4 months of despair, and you and I were really getting fired up about things, and I had never felt that before, and I was like, "I can't believe everything that I was fighting for in my 20s as an activist is like it's being undone." And you said this thing and I was like, "Oh my gosh." You said, "Mom, you've done it. You've been an activist already. It's our turn." And I was like, "Oh, well, that is true, and thank you, but I still think I have to come out of the closet of retirement as an activist anyway to help save the world." And then the other thing that you said is that you and I started talking about core beliefs around just core beliefs, and you said, "Mom, if that's really what you believe, you're a leftist. You're not a liberal."
I
And I
remember that.
and I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess you're right." And then you started me off on this whole other path because when you're in it and you're when the generation, you sometimes don't notice the subtle shift, for example, from like liberal, what used to be liberal, to neoliberal, which isn't that different from conservatives, et cetera. So anyway, so just, I love your thoughts about I don't know. I just love our conversations about like what is really the role of an economy? Is it really to like just empower a small number of people to have as much money as possible that they're never ever even going to spend, and then to like why is like there are just certain things that don't make sense to have a framework that has to do with profit. Like taking care of sick people is not a profit making venture. Educating people is not a profit making venture. In order to make it profitable, you actually have to then ignore really sick people or people who can't afford to buy. So then it becomes a privilege thing. So, I just like wherever you want to sort of go with, either what you're hoping is going to happen, or what you'd like to see, or just your feelings, just whatever you want to share there.
Well, first I want to hit on something you said, the role of an econ. I think that's an interesting way to put it, and I
Hmm.
think that's indicative of this inherent American understanding of the economy doesn't have a role to play. It doesn't exist. It is a collection of consequences of running a barter and trade system.
And can I quick share like just a little
Yeah.
mini story to like just explain to people what I'm, because this is how my brain works, this is how your brain works. So this was probably about 15 years ago, and your dad and I were out someplace. I think we were at Oktoberfest or something, and I we were talking about like how it seemed that there was like a Prozac epidemic. Like everybody was on Prozac. And I was like, oh my gosh. And your dad said this thing. He goes, well, it's good for the economy. And I went,
That's awesome.
I was beside myself and I said, but what is the role of the economy? Is it really just to generate,
Hey, he
jobs
was
and
an
money?
economics major. You can't. You gotta let
but
him have one.
but
Like,
I exhausted your dad with questions like that. He's like, I
I'm
don't want to
sure.
really talk about it. So, but anyway, but this is what I'm talking about, where people are like, oh, well, that's good for the economy. Or like right now, like everybody is this is, Biden is
And
like, oh, we have the lowest unemployment. Well,
what
that
does
doesn't
good
mean
for the
anything.
economy mean,
That's
right?
right.
Like,
Exactly.
what do you mean good for the economy? Like, why? Who
Like, who is this
cares? Who
economy
cares?
person?
who cares? Why isn't it good for the country? Like, who cares about the economy? This is what, and this is like something as obviously I don't have any money or any value of anything that's not attached to you guys. So I don't have anything in the stock market, but neither does like 75% of the country. So it's what does saying it's good for the economy mean? Nothing. It means nothing. It means it's good for billionaires, really.
Mhm.
And obviously, like I'm not dumb. Like if the economy collapses, I'm not gonna sit here like pretending like there's gonna be some socialist revolution. No, no, no. When that happens, it gets even worse, not better.
Mhm.
I have no misunderstand. I'm not rooting for the end of the country or anything.
Right.
I just think it's important to understand that we have allowed this concept of the economy to be so decentralized and in the hands of people who are so uncaring of what happens to our country that it has become that our country is dependent on this like indicator, this like essentially guess, and it just blows my mind because if it really is just a big casino um, that covered in a bunch of fancy economist terms to cover up what is essentially guessing and betting. And I just find it really interesting the way that the economy is talked about in this country
Mhm.
because the economy this it's like it shouldn't we shouldn't be saying the economy
Right.
like it's this
It's more like who
this
is the
separate entity.
right, who is the economy working for? Because the economy is a system, like you said. And so, for example, one of the things that really bothers me is we all know there is this whole segment of the population that is considered working poor. They're not poor because they're not working. They're poor despite their working. And
Yeah,
so when somebody brags that this is the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, that means nothing to me.
yeah,
That means nothing. What okay, so so does that
and
mean that
also doesn't
it's
include undocumented people either.
well, right. And does that mean it's okay that a family of four, like the mother and father, each have two jobs? Like, yay, the unemployment rate is low.
Well,
Let's
you know what a
celebrate.
conservative would say. Yes, that is good.
Well, right,
That's what they want to see.
because you want to get as much as you can. You want to bleed somebody and pay them the least amount
Yeah,
of money
and
that they'll take. Yeah.
I think also I was kind of running in circles, but the idea of the economy um in other countries, you don't hear about other countries talking about their economy so much because they actually have functioning countries that aren't like tape held together with bits of tape and bubble gum. Or right, like why is it that every 1 year news cycle there's this like chiron of economy collapsing? Like how come every year there's a new thing that is going to cause the end of the country and no other country experiences this? Isn't
Right.
it, doesn't that make you think like maybe this isn't sustainable to have our entire country
Right.
interconnected and it thrown around like a political
Right.
football? Like, doesn't that sound like a bad
And
idea?
and the other thing that just one more thing I want to add is that often we think like this it's good that we have the largest philanthropic like sector in the world. And then one day I remember thinking, oh, the
What
reason
does that
that
mean?
the purpose for a nonprofit is actually to fill the gap that's left by failing policies. So yay, we have
Yeah,
strong
yeah,
nonprofits because we have failing policies. And that completely like shifted my thinking about like, no, this is actually not good. We have to like have this patchwork of people who are overworked to go beg from other millionaires to actually fill in the gaps and make sure people aren't starving to death because our policies are not adequate.
yeah. It's reverse socialism, right?
Mhm.
It's privatizing the gains and socializing the losses.
Yes.
That's the entire point of the economy and the capitalist system. Why do
Right.
you think it's people like you and I who foot the fucking bill for sorry, who foot the bill to go search for these bozos who wanted to go float around in a tin can under the ocean? I'm talking about the
Mhm.
submersible. Why is it the taxpayers that fund that? But but they don't have any responsibility to fund anything. That's exactly what it is. It's
Right.
that guy understood the risks and he took them, and the losses are being socialized onto the
Right.
public because he's a billionaire and they have more privileges
Hmm.
and they are seen as a protected class.
Right.
And by protected, I don't mean marginalized. I just mean they are just protected
Right. Well, it's the
because
same.
they have protection.
Well, it's yeah. I mean, it's the same with in the 80s and 90s. We used to call it corporate welfare. So it's like,
Yeah,
we paid
or
taxpayers footed the bill for a lot of the research for COVID, but yet we're not sharing,
but they
those
get the
formula.
profits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not sharing those, and then we get price gouged as well, and
Hmm.
then all of that. So
Yeah.
anyway, that go ahead.
I just want to wrap that up. If you every single thing we just talked about comes down to one issue, and I'm not simplifying it. It
Hmm.
is literally just the fact that the profit motive is a ridiculous, silly, and damaging concept that needs to be eradicated as quickly as possible. Like, who the hell does the profit motive benefit? It is literally, it is like mathematically the worst way to approach that system. It's like I just can't, like, that always drives me crazy. It's like, what's the point of a healthcare company, right? You
Hmm.
would say to,
Provide health care and
right?
prevent major illness, and yeah,
Exactly. What is the point of a restaurant? To,
to serve good food.
no, it's to make money, mom.
Oh,
Obviously.
oh,
No,
I forgot.
every like and that's what's so ridiculous, right? If you ask any capitalist, what's the point of company X? Oh, to make a blank That's not true.
It
In America, the point of every single company
absolutely.
is to make as much money as they can fit in their pockets and to keep making more and to never make any less.
Well,
And that is the point. And they
and
have no other motive not to make a good product, not to help the society, not to help anyone but themselves, and that is so damaging to a country. But sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, and maybe I'm naive in believing that there used to be more, maybe it was just pretending, but there used to be more like, okay, if we actually design a product that is in need and then we hire and pay good workers so they make a quality product, then we will end up getting a good return on investment. And I remember when I graduated from Marquette, a Jesuit university. And 2 years later, I had an intern from Marquette in the business school, and they had changed so much. And he told me one day, he goes, "No, no, no, no. The role of a company is to
The
it,
shareholders.
yeah." And I went, "No, it's not. It's customer, employees, investors, community." And he's like, "No, no, no. They're teaching us that no, no, no. The sole role of a company and a corporation is to make money for investors." And I thought, whoa, this from my Catholic Jesuit university.
Can I
Wow,
just
have things
interject
changed?
before I forget?
Yeah.
I just want to say the companies that built America lost money. They lost money. They would lose money on products. Like, car companies would put out unsuccessful cars. That would happen all the time. Nowadays, they don't even try. If it doesn't
Mm,
guarantee to make them money, they don't even try. And that, if you think that
mm,
encourages innovation,
no.
you're right. It wasn't just pretending. And I think this is something conservatives and Republicans and capitalists would agree with me on, is outsourcing our labor has removed the opportunity for us to be proud in our national products, in our national industry, because it's all made in China now. How are we supposed to be proud? Like, yeah, Apple is an American company, but we don't make any of their fucking products. That we don't. All we do is sell them. All we do is have the CEO. Like, I mean, back in the day, GM, all these like we invented the airplane, like stuff like that we could be
Mhm.
proud of, but now it's all outsourced. and owned by this interconnected web of conglomerates
So
that
it's
has nothing to do with
so
us
it's
as
not
people.
it's not like an American effort or like a
No,
collective effort where everybody's valued and plays their role
exactly.
in the idea. There's an idea generation, and then there's talent, and we value the talent, and then
Exactly.
people are excited about it.
It
Yeah.
was American minds coming up with American
Yeah.
ideas and American hands building those ideas.
Right.
And that was something we could be proud of. And that was something we could sacrifice profit for. But we've gone back on that. And instead of like we don't have any opportunities to do that anymore. And I think it's this feedback loop of people aren't proud in the work they do because they don't know what they do anymore. It's so convoluted and outsourced that you're working for like a consulting agency that's owned by a conglomerate that's owned by another conglomerate that's owned by a US company that's owned by another company in Japan, and it's like you can't even follow the line anymore, and it's like
So
that.
there is no sense of collective or
Yeah,
community. Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that has allowed it to become so bad to the point where no one really knows what they do anymore,
And
and no one really is proud about what they do anymore
and
because
also
they
the
understand how bad the system is.
and also the people way up here are so
Oh
detached
yeah,
from reality that they become immoral. Like
exactly.
their
Yeah.
decisions truly are
Well,
immoral.
you can't make it to that position without being immoral, right? Like,
Or like being in therapy for, the role that you're playing in the mess. So
yeah, I think most of those people are sociopaths. Like, you can't
you
be a
almost would have to
CEO.
be, right?
You have to, like, unless you're so ignorant of what's going on,
Yeah.
like you genuinely have no idea. Like maybe like someone like Aunt Chrissy, right? Who's like I could see just being like told like she would like she's just happy to do a job,
Hmm.
like and not fully under because she you know what I'm saying, like the type of
Yeah.
person who's just happy to do a job.
Yes.
Like I could see that, but like if you knew what was going on, like there's some CEOs where I can tell like, oh, they just like they they're in way over their head, and then there's some
Yeah.
CEOs where you just there's just a blank stare on their
Oh,
face, right?
there's like
like
no soul
like
in
what's
there.
the Starbucks guy, like
Oh,
there's
right.
there's a difference between like a CEO of like a small company and like
Yes.
these soulless vessels that
Yeah.
occupy like Mark Zuckerberg and people like them, and it's like I don't know where I'm going with this, but you have to be a very particular type of person, either completely unaware of what's
Yeah.
going on or uncaring. And
I'm
there's
sh-
really
yeah.
no other way around it. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do think it's interesting that at the end of the day, I'm just a huge the profit motives gotta go. Why does it exist? It helps no one. It hurts
And
everyone.
why can't we talk about alternatives?
Yeah,
Why is that so taboo?
why
Like
why is there this idea like there's only the profit motive?
there's almost a religious righteousness
Well,
about it.
there is in the definition, and it basically is a religion because all statistics and science points to one thing, and they believe the other in all opposition, just
Yeah.
for no reason other than they like it. They
Right.
like it, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
like seeing the green arrows go up in the percentages and the watching the stock app on their phone. It's like there's like nerds like who do this stuff who
Right.
enjoy it, but it's
And
like
and then if they have to walk by a homeless person, they're like, "Oh, I don't like that. Get that out of my way.
yeah, like
Sweep those people
yeah,
away."
like how dare you occupy the public space?
Yeah,
Like,
it is kind of like a real life dystopian movie. I
well,
mean,
yeah, and that's what I think people don't understand is you don't need dystopia to be fiction. It's all around you. Like,
yeah.
just look around. Like, I mean, I saw someone. I don't mean to like harp on the submarine thing again. It's just kind of cogent, but
Yeah.
I saw someone posting. There are people like one out of I think it was like 1 out of 3 cancer. Like, don't quote me on this. I don't want to be wrong. I think I saw a statistic where it's like 1 out of 3 cancer patients dies because they can't continue to
Oh my
afford
god.
paying for their treatment, and there's billions of dollars being spent looking for these dicks in the tube underwater, like I was talking about, that they knew were dead the fucking second it happened,
Oh
and
my god.
There's people dying from cancer on the street. There's people starving to death. There's people
It
drinking
is
themselves
like
to
a
death. And
weird
we're like there's
disconnect.
this whole spectacle on the news of these people in the submarine, and it's like I can't help but like be insanely upset about that. Like
Yeah.
I go outside and I see homeless people. It's like, why isn't that on the news? Why aren't you
Right.
spending money on that? Like,
Yeah.
why are these billionaires allowed to do that? And
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know, but I feel bad for that. That I couldn't help but relate with that kid who was on there, the 19-year-old who didn't want to go. I'm like,
Mm.
I'm like, if Dad asked me to go on that, I would have been like, hell no. Fuck Father's Day. No way. Absolutely not. You
Yeah.
couldn't get me to go in that
Mm.
if you forced me to. I would
Yeah.
just rather die. And
Yeah.
I just couldn't help but, like relate to that. So it is sad, but I also think it is a very shockingly perfect example of how insane the like wealth the disparity between um or what's the
Yeah.
term for it? The wealth
Just
gap.
yeah. Yeah.
I just think it's a great example of that and how I don't think a lot of people I'm not against rich people.
Right.
I like mansions. I like cool cars and fast boats. Everyone does. But you know what you don't need to have that? $1 billion. You can
Right.
buy anything you ever want if you have $100 million. You could buy anything you'd ever dream of for $10 million, unless you're a psychopath.
Right. Right.
But it's like I don't think a lot of people understand the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire. It's unfathomable. Your
Yeah.
brain literally does not have the facilities to show you that difference.
Right.
And I just think people don't really understand how ridiculous it is to have $1 billion and the what you can't spend that on. The fact that
Mm-hmm.
you can never and just the idea that you shouldn't have that much money. And I just there's so many people who defend that for no
It's
poor people, people who struggle to pay their rent will defend them. And I'm like, I just it makes me so upset because I'm like
I know.
it's like how can't you see that I'm sorry, like this is my favorite thing to talk to a capitalist about because it's like so if making you a sandwich is worth $15 an hour, what task is worth $100 an hour to you? Okay, now what task is worth $1,000 an hour to you? Okay, now what task is worth $1 billion? There is nothing you could do as a single person to create that much value except steal it from other people.
Yeah.
There is, it
And,
doesn't
and
matter.
it's
It
and
doesn't
it's
matter. Sorry, go ahead.
and it's the system that allows that. It's
Yes,
tax policy.
they're
It's
not
not you
earning it.
didn't do
They're not
that.
earning it. They're
Right.
funneling it from other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if you had
No.
more to add.
No,
I just
that's okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, this idea that you could earn $1 billion is so ridiculous because you can't. If it's possible to make $15 an hour, it can't be possible to make enough to be a billionaire because there is not enough variety of things that a human can do with their hands that is that different. You could go find the biggest diamond on planet Earth and mine it with your hands, and you wouldn't make $1 billion.
Right.
There's
Yep.
nothing you can do to make that much
Yeah.
value. And I think the idea of what a person should be making is what they put into society. Like
Yeah.
someone who works
Well,
at McDonald's should get paid how much money people pay them.
right.
Like
Well,
it's simple.
actually, and then yeah, I shouldn't have left this for the last question because it's the one you're fired up about. We'll have to have another
We can
conversation,
keep going. I don't
but
have a time
there
limit.
well, I kind of do with my
Oh,
interviews,
okay.
but we'll have another conversation another time because I think there's more to talk about. And
Absolutely.
I love your thoughts. But I did interview. I learned this from my depth psychology colleague that the root and the origins of the corporation was to serve the community. It was to be as a community grew, the corporation was to bring efficiency in order to meet the needs of the community. It wasn't really about profit. And so
And
our relationship with with the corporation has changed. And I think until we start to take ownership and accountability for what we have projected onto the corporate entity, that, you know what I mean? That's part of what has to happen, a kind of consciousness raising that is new. So,
I I think a good example is someone like Grandpa, uh, Dad's dad.
mhm,
I won't say any names just for anonymity, but um, we have grandparents in Kohler who worked with the Kohler company for like 50 years, and they still live there. That doesn't happen anymore. You don't have companies that like provide that anymore. Like they that would they worked the equivalent of like middle income jobs, nice house, plenty of kids, like plenty of disposable income.
mhm.
They never got fired. Their company would give them raises. That doesn't exist
Right.
anymore
Well,
because
they refer to that as like the unspoken social contract that used to
yes,
exist that doesn't exist anymore.
and the
Yeah.
corporations have gone back on that while the people haven't. We
Yeah.
still work for them and provide them our labor, but they do not provide for us. And there has to become I don't like I'm not going full Marxist here, but there has to be a moment where the people take that back because they don't have corporations without the workers.
Right.
And that's where like organization unionization comes in. I know you're a huge fan of that, but
Mhm.
it's like it's coming to a boiling point where you can't you can't keep exploiting people to this point. Something's gonna break, and
Yeah,
I feel like it's gonna happen soon
it
because
will.
even 50 years ago, like sooner, but you'd find a job, even if you didn't have any higher education, you'd find a job. They'd mentor you and teach you
Yeah.
and promote you.
And you can
Now
make a living. Yep.
now even me with a college degree, I've applied for like 20 companies and none of them even consider me. Back in the day, you got a job, they would teach you and help you become what they wanted you to be.
Mhm.
Now it's if you're not exactly what we want you to be and above and beyond before we hire you, you're not even being considered. And I think I have a very particular perspective on this because I've been told my whole life, oh, it's going to be so easy to get a job. You have such a good degree. Everyone's hiring. And it's just not the
It's
case
BS.
whatsoever. It's complete BS.
Rachel's experiencing it too. She's applied for
Everyone I
30
know,
jobs. Yeah.
everyone I know, smart people, talented people, passionate people, can't find jobs. And
Yeah.
it's not because we don't want to work. That is such a ridiculous notion.
Yeah.
And I just feel like there's like a boiling point
Yeah.
happening where
All
it's
right. So yeah, I this is a good place to end, I think, on that
okay.
note. So so I guess I guess maybe the one thing that maybe just a parting thought is that, you know, your generation is not only sort of coming of age during this clear climaxing and clashing and dismantling and chaos and the potential end of our species. And so there's like you guys are different, and there's also this anxiety because what needs to happen, there needs to be a transition, a transcendence from what is not working. It's the climax of exploitive systems, but we don't know what to create. Right. So there's this unknown, I think, that's creating a lot of anxiety. And at the same time, you're being demonized by the capitalists and the boomers who have gotten theirs as, you know, you're wrecking our economy. You're, you know, you don't want to work. You know, and so there is a lot of mental health issues in your generation. You know, there's epidemics of depression and ADHD, and we don't even really know, you know, what all the causes of that, and paralysis. And I talk to a lot of moms of especially young men who are like, it does make sense how easily, you know, people in your generation could be exploited because there is this anxiety about what I don't want to participate in this corrupt system, but I still have to carve out my place in the world while I'm creating something else. So just any parting thoughts you have about sort of that, just, you know, helping people understand what it feels like to be you and your generation.
Yeah, I think a lot of older people have a very particular caricature of what someone like my age
Mm-hmm.
is. And I just, we're no different than anyone else, any other generation used to be. The only thing that's changed is the context we're living in,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, they made for us. So I just, it's important to understand that we just want to live. We just
Right.
want to have a life.
Right.
We want to be able to wear what we want. We want to be able to love who we love. We want to be able to read the books we want to read. We want to be able to go to a school that will actually teach us the truth. I don't think people really understand what we want, and they just dictate it for us to
Mm-hmm.
whatever fits their own stupid narrative. Which a lot of the times is this idea that we're lazy and that we are defeatists and doomers who are just giving up. And
Oh, just because you're fighting back. That's all.
and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, if you served me up a steaming hot pile of shit, I'm not going to be smiling about it. Sure.
Right.
Like, don't expect me to be grateful for the awful, like, wreck of a society you left for us. And it's like, not you. You're not. You're Gen X. You guys did a good job. You guys started picking up the pieces early. Um, but I just think it's important for. I think a lot of people, older people, feel attacked when they hear
Mm,
people like me speaking like this, and
yeah.
good, they should. They really should, because they need to realize that it is their fault. They need to stop pretending
Right.
like they aren't the problem. That putting lead in the gasoline was a horrible idea that like ruined countless generations of people. Who did that? Not my generation. So, I mean, it is important for people to take responsibility for what their generation did. And
Mm-hmm.
we haven't had enough time to ruin the planet yet. So maybe we will, maybe we won't. But you guys, or not you guys, you know what I'm saying. But it's like,
Yeah.
I just feel like a lot of older people are so unwilling to take responsibility. And not everyone has personally done it. But I'm
Right.
not saying take personal responsibility. I'm
No.
saying take responsibility for your generation and acknowledge what happened. And it's
Right.
like, and
And
it's like,
right. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, let's
no,
do better, man.
no, it's the same thing as
Yeah.
me being a kid acknowledging that
Right.
I'm the problem and I need to change to make
Right.
things better. And it's
Right.
like, you guys don't have to, you boomers, older people don't have to resist with all of their might to what we want. They could just help us.
Right.
You
Oh,
know,
oh, that's a
when
I love
when
it.
we want to make our planet a better place, they don't have to be upset and spiteful that they did it. They don't have to be embarrassed about it and
Right.
spiteful. They
Just
could
help.
help us clean. They could
Yeah.
help us be stewards of the natural world.
Yeah.
They don't have to be so spiteful about it. And in reaction to us, hugging a tree, opening up a new oil field, you don't need to do that. You could just help us. And
Right.
I just think I just want older people to understand, like, yeah, we are mad at you, of course we are, and we have a right to, and you have no right to be upset about it. And the fact that you are pretending to be upset about it is more indicative of your unwillingness to help anyone but yourself than anything else. And
Yeah.
I'm of course I'm generalizing because it's
Yes.
hard to talk about a group of people
Right.
like that, but
Yes.
in general, people like dad, they're very different and understanding, and would not, he doesn't react. I feel like so many older people are reactionaries, and they don't act out of any purpose other
And
than
and
reacting to
ins
us,
and instead of they could just be curious
or helpful, right?
or
Like,
helpful.
or
Yeah.
do nothing, or just
Yeah.
watch. But they take it upon themselves to roadblock us at every turn they get. That they want that, it doesn't matter what it is. If we want it, it's bad, and they want to stop it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't matter if it's accepting our like uh trans and queer brothers and sisters, or people of any color. It doesn't matter if it's just being more accepting, or wanting to preserve the environment, or hell, just wanting to um you listen to different music.
Mhm.
Literally, name a thing. It's all reactions. Rap music, older people, yeah, it's not music. It doesn't matter what it is. It's all just a reaction of disliking and disdain towards the younger generation because we are able to do new things that they
Yeah.
aren't able to do. We are
They're
able to start cultural
they're just
movements.
they're just mad at themselves. It's a
Exactly.
projection.
Exactly.
So this is a good place to end. And I really like I really like your message of, you know what? Just help us.
Yeah. Can I
Like,
add one more
yes.
thing too?
Yeah.
And I mean I don't automatically have any malice towards older people.
No, you're a
It is
polite person.
no, it is always I'm always a person's actions are the only thing that matters to me.
Mhm.
And but I do think you can look at the collective actions of that generation and see a shocking like antagonism towards our like what we want to do has nothing to do with them, but everything they do has to do with us,
Right.
which I just think is just let us be us. Just like we don't want to hurt you. We don't want anything to do with you. We just want to be left alone.
Right.
So either help us or don't. But
Yes.
you don't have to actively antagonize
Right.
us. I just want to make it clear that our generation doesn't hate older people.
Right.
They have just, they're constantly being spit on and insulted by them. So there's this initial, it's like being a woman walking around in public. If you're a younger person and you see an older person, you just expect for them to say
Hmm.
some condescending shit
Hmm.
because it usually happens.
Oh.
And so it's not it's a reaction out of like fear and like just
Yeah.
you don't want to deal
Yeah.
with these people because you assume they're going to act a
Right.
certain way. But anyways, I just want to make it clear that our
No,
generation doesn't hate older people, which they seem to think.
I
It's them giving us reasons to talk about them in a bad manner.
I think that's a great, respectful message from you. And for my listeners, I'm going to put a link to a blog post I wrote called What is Generation Z Mirroring Back to Us, which is really getting at this. So thank you, William,
Of course, thanks for having me.
for a conversation full of depth and allowing me to show you off to the world as a Gen Z human being whose hands I'm willing to put the fate of the world in, along
And
with
I
your
appreciate that.
along with your sisters. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation with William, my son, and a Generation Z human being who's kind and whose frustration I appreciate. Until next time.